So I absolutely love hearing from our listeners on social media, email. Please keep that coming. And our guest on today's podcast is Roger Maynulet, and he actually hit me up on Facebook. He's a listener, and he felt like he could share some insight on his experience. He's been flying since 2006. He's held a myriad of positions, including some overseas in Africa, and now most currently flying for Air Methods. This is an awesome conversation. We talk a lot about his experience in air medical, what he does to be prepared, the things that he does even to this day, even though he's been flying for so long, to just be a safe, proficient pilot. So I think you're going to really take a lot out of this episode. I know that I loved having the conversation. So big thanks to Roger for reaching out. I'm so glad you did. This has been an awesome podcast. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the Helicopter Podcast.
As always, a special thanks to Helicopter for producing this podcast. Specializing in helicopter evaluations, faster sales, and superb service, Helicopter is the go-to agency for clients expecting immediate results. Helicopter's team of helicopter professionals are the best in the business. Using their aviation expertise, a nationwide network, and a proprietary 76-step listing strategy, Helicopter will convert your listing from Mayday to payday. Ready to get started? Text Helicopter to 1-855-Helicopter. That's Helicopter to 1-855-735-5226. And a Helicopter pilot agent will reach out. Helicopter. List it, sell it, done.
Hey guys, welcome to the Helicopter Podcast. This is Halsey Scheider, and I am super excited. One of the things that I love about doing the podcast is connecting with new people. It's truly a small helicopter industry, but there's so many people that I still don't know. And so I'm always super excited to connect with new individuals. And today I'm connecting with a new friend of mine, Roger Maynulet. Roger, what's happening?
How's it going, Halsey?
I,
Good.
did I say your last name right? I felt kind of robotic on it.
Nope, you did good.
Okay, perfect. Well, Roger, thanks so much for reaching out. Roger actually hit us up on Facebook. Um, was kind of sharing some of his experience, what he's done, and I just thought, man, this guy would be a perfect guest. So thanks so much for coming on the show, Roger. And like I said, it's fun to talk to my friends that I know, but it's actually kind of more fun to talk to guys that I don't know. So really
I,
excited to.
I was almost regretting reaching out to you because then I looked at some of the old podcasts and I saw the kind of guests you had. I was like, I'm nowhere near the level of these guys with Sean Moretz and then the Thresher guy who was doing the ground school. I mean, amazing
Eric, yeah.
idea that I wish I had that idea too. I mean, these guys are really killing it.
Yeah, Eric's awesome. The Thresher. God, what did he have on the podcast? He talked about his some of his theories, and one of his theories was his last name theory, Thresher theory, or something. And I thought it was really different and neat and agreeable. You know, something along the lines of once the helicopter is running, people start doing silly things.
Yep, exactly.
Whether I always revert back to the story. You know, when I was working air medical, they told us at Air Evac that there was a security guard at a hospital pad that had I think you've heard the story. You know, he's been
No,
working the
no,
job.
I think it happens everywhere. But go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, this guy's worked 20 years and he was close to retirement. He's familiar with the helicopter, and uh, and he ended up walking into the tail rotor of a helicopter after 20 years. And I remember Eric and I talking about that. When the helicopter is making noise, it's spinning, it's loud. you can have a ton of experience. This guy, 20 years of cutting traffic off so this helicopter could land on the ground pad, and he walks in to the tail rotor. So, yeah, Eric was great. How do you know Sean?
Sean was my DPE for my private and commercial licenses, and I mean, having him essentially not just be a DPE, but he's a mentor. I mean, when you're in that helicopter with him, he's teaching you as well, and having him so early in my helicopter career really formed a nice foundation of how to go about this career, and it's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, Sean is awesome. Sean is a longtime friend. I met him as a DPE as well. We never did check rides together until my instrument and my double I, which I did way after I had been an instructor for a long time. But I scheduled all the check rides for Hillsborough Aviation. And so him and I
Perfect.
became good buddies. And yeah, I mean, he's just good guy. What year did you get your certificate?
I started flying in 2005.
Okay.
I spent 9 years in the Army, not aviation related, except riding in the back occasionally of helicopters. But I'd always wanted to fly, so I moved to Vegas and started with a really small school there. I made a visit to Silver State. I didn't like what I saw, and I went over to this little trailer in Boulder City called Leading Edge Rotorcraft, and that's where it started. They had two little R-22s, and just went from there.
That's awesome. Yeah, 2005. The funny thing about Sean Moretz is he probably looked the same in 2005 as
He's a
he looks
vampire.
now.
He's a
He
vampire.
doesn't age. And if you're listening, if you don't know who Sean is, episode 1 of the Helicopter Podcast, the first ever podcast I did was with Sean. Sean is now the chief pilot at Helinet, which we had a episode at Helinet drop a couple weeks ago, and he is still active DPE. So man, he's just a wealth of knowledge. So it's really cool. I'm not surprised that you know him because everybody knows Sean.
Yeah, yeah. And if you
He,
don't, I would say search him out because he's a wealth of information. And there are certain check airmen and instructors that have this demeanor that I definitely didn't have as a CFI. That they are very good at putting you at ease in the cockpit, and that draws out the best performance out of somebody.
totally.
Um, there are guys. There's a Dan Bandolin. When I was in Africa, he was a great check airman, and he just had this relaxed. You could be doing whatever you could be doing in that helicopter, and he's just nice and calm, and just be like, okay, now let's do this, now let's do that, and just put you at ease, and that those butterflies that everyone still gets in a check ride, they all go away.
Excuse me. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think Sean and I have talked about that. I think we talked about it on the podcast as well. It's like there's certainly two types of DPEs. The ones that are kind of like a drill sergeant, and then
Yep.
the ones that are like Sean. And I really think that um, I think it's more effective to be like Sean. Sean and others like him. The guy that I did all my check rides with was a guy named Mark Holstat, gentle giant, Vietnam guy, 30 years at Life Flight Network. He was like the grandfather I never had, essentially. I mean, he was an amazing man, still is an amazing man. And they were able to, I think, put themselves back in that shoe of, hey, this guy's taking his private check ride. In his life up to this point, this could be the biggest moment for this individual, this guy or gal. And so I think it's nice for them to be able to know that perspective and remember that perspective, remember that feeling, and go and encourage the applicant to do the best possible job. Because it's hard, man. When you're nervous, we're all not the best pilots when we're getting evaluated.
Oh no.
I'm doing the ski patrol training right now up in Oregon, and I'm like a expert, air quotes expert skier. I've been skiing my entire life, and the stuff that we're learning is complicated and different. Driving this toboggan and getting evaluated is so uncomfortable, and it really
Sure.
reminds me a lot of like check rides. And actually, these evaluators are kind of intense. It's a volunteer program, and they're kind of like hardcore. And I guess it's good, but part of me is kind of like, man, I wish this was a little more relaxed,
Sure.
because it does, it's hard to perform when you got those eyes on you. So I'm glad that you had that experience with Sean, and yeah, he's a wonderful guy. Um, so I see that have a Mercy Air shirt on,
Sure.
Air Methods. So are you an Air Methods guy?
I've been with Air Methods for 5 years, and I spent 4 years as a lead pilot in Fort Mojave, Arizona. And since last April, I've been a relief pilot for the region, for the Pac West region, and just traveling from Alaska to California. I haven't been to Washington, even though it's my region, and then Nevada and Arizona.
And where are you calling home right now?
Las Vegas. I've been living
Las
in Las
Vegas.
Vegas since 2005, and
Oh, that's crazy.
I think Las Vegas is the unofficial capital of helicopter pilots.
There's a ton of helicopter pilots there for many reasons.
Sure.
I lived in Vegas. I flew at Maverick, and I loved Vegas. My wife and I just moved back to Oregon, where we're from Texas, and we actually thought about maybe going halfway and moving back to Vegas because we just loved the area. We love the people. Um, it's a great community, and you're exactly right. It's like a little mecca, a little helicopter mecca.
It really is. I wouldn't. I'm surprised that there isn't more infrastructure, such as a flight safety or something like that there, just because I think you can get a lot out of it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Um, that's interesting. One of the things that I always think about, my buddy Ian, who's a former guest on the show as well, he's a relief pilot for MedTrans. You're a relief guy. Um, what is it like to go, say, to Alaska? Somewhere that's sounds intense, at least on paper, and for all purposes, is probably kind of an intense environment. Weather can change really fast. Very unfamiliar environment for you living in Las Vegas. What do you do as a professional pilot to go and work a base in Alaska or a base in California, anywhere that's unfamiliar with you? How do you go and have the confidence to go and accomplish that mission safely?
Sure. It's one of the exciting things about being a relief pilot because it keeps me from getting into that complacent rut. And I've kind of developed this routine where when I know I'm getting assigned to a base that I haven't worked at, whether it's Alaska, it could be a place in California, wherever, I'll contact the area manager or the lead pilot at that base. I'm like, hey, send me all your info, all your base info, all that, just so I can get into the trailer when I get there. And your frequencies, if you have a kneeboard packet, all that kind of stuff. And lead pilots, this is a great thing to have to be able to send to any guest pilots that you have. It makes the transition a lot easier when you show up. I always try my best to have a first shift up there of just day shifts. It's not a good idea to go somewhere you're not familiar with and jump into nights. I did that once and probably never again, especially when the scene calls come up. But and then for Alaska, again, just start studying the weather, start looking at when the sun rises, when the sun sets. Going in the summertime is a lot better than going in the wintertime, and studying the terrain. And then when you get there, try and get a local area flight out there. The crews in Alaska, very professional. They know the areas really well. They're all outdoorsmen and outdoors women, so they know the routes. They know everything about the weather patterns. They're an excellent resource. So again, that crew resource management is very important as a relief pilot. And then you get settled in. Your crew brief with the crew is extremely important, and making sure that they get comfortable with you because you're coming from somewhere else. They don't know who this guy is, and they're going to put their lives in your hands. So it's important to get kind of just that routine. I like to show up the day before my shift starts, drop my gear at the base, and just kind of have everything set so everything's less chaotic when the shift starts.
Yeah, I mean that's awesome, and it's good to hear. You got your certificate in 2005. When did you get your commercial? What year?
2006. So
Okay, so
I burned right through it. I
yeah,
went full time. Yeah.
so you were a good student, unlike some of us. Raising my hand here, I was like 19 and stupid. Um, I mean, you've been a professional pilot since 2006, and I think it's valuable for not only our listeners that might just be getting into aviation, but listeners that also are experienced commercial helicopter pilots that even you are doing your due diligence prior to going to a new base. You're not just showing up and throwing caution to the wind. You're going through the of contacting lead pilots, area managers, things like that. I think that's really valuable, and I'm glad that you are doing that. I hope that's kind of a cultural thing for a lot of lead pilots. I know my buddy Ian that does it for MedTrans. He also has kind of a similar process. I did one workover in a random state one time. It was in Kentucky, and I man, it's intense. Even Kentucky's pretty easy flying. It was beautiful, rolling hills. We had a cool scene call, um, but it's a whole new ball game when you're used to flying the same route or the same hospitals over and over, and then you're going into this familiar or unfamiliar deal. So it's pretty cool that you're to this day still taking that to heart. So good on you for that.
I think it's important for obviously safety and all that, but you want to show up and look like a professional, be like a professional, and you want to be invited back, especially to the cool places like Alaska. They're like, oh yeah, Roger, he took flights and he was really good and friendly. Like, yeah, let's have him back because a lot of people want to fly up there. So it's there's some self interest in that too. So
One of the things that you brought up when you were talking about it as well was relying on the crew
oh yeah.
and not just considering them. The old self-loading baggage. I think is certainly a saying that's dying, which is good. Um, in fact, uh, we're recording for the future, but in 2 weeks we're dropping an episode with the CEO of Life Flight Network, Ben Clayton, and so this will air after. But we talk about that is how important that crew resource management is, and I got a little bit from Ben because he has a pilot background. But to you, as a guy that's been in now as 5 years in air medical, or did you do it before as well?
No, just 5 years. This has been
I
my
mean, five
most recent.
years.
Yeah.
That's a long time in air medical too. I lasted 2 years, so good on you. Um, what does that mean to you, crew resource management? I know we go to training and it's kumbaya and everybody, let's not hurt each other's feelings. But in practical sense, real world sense, and a guy like you that's going from base to base to base, what does it mean to you?
Well, it starts day one when you show up and you do your shift change brief with the crew, and hopefully everyone's doing that. Um, a lot of times it's very directive from certain pilots. It's you've got your little checklist. Air Methods has little checklists for you to follow, and I still do. And there's certain things you may touch on more than others. One trick that I like to use to get that trust and build that initial trust and get the crew involved is I tell them, I go, I've been flying for 18 years. Uh, I'm going to fly however you want me to fly. Um, you've got the pilots who be like, I'm the PIC, I'm in charge, I'm going to do this. You guys just sitting back and shut up. But really, if you've been flying for 15 years plus, the 10 years plus, you should be professional enough that you can adapt your flying to make your passengers comfortable. So I tell them, I go, my job's to make you guys as comfortable as possible so you can take care of the patient. So if you want me to fly higher, I'll fly higher, fly lower. I'll make left turns, I'll make right turns. As long as I'm not breaking any regulations or company policies, I'm going to fly however you guys like and you feel comfortable. When you say that, first thing, when the crew first meets you, you see this this breath where they're like, okay, I can work with this guy. This guy's not, you know, uh, the trust builds from that moment on, and then from there, they'll usually just be like, "Oh, Raj, just fly however you like." But in their mind, they feel that they're part of it now. With the Mercy Cruise, I've flown with the different programs within Air Methods, Tri-State. With the Mercy Cruise, they do a fantastic job of making them part of the crew. I don't know if that's because there's like in the 407, it's tough because the crew's in the back and you have no one up next to you. But if you're in the 429, you're in the 109 or something, you've got the medic usually sitting co-pilot with you. And some guys, they know how to run the GPSs. They know how to run the radios. They can do a lot for you. And I wasn't used to that coming from the tri-state side of it. And I was like, wow, this is great. And some are getting their own pilot's licenses, so they're really involved in in the aviation part of it, and they can really help you out, especially in the busy airspace in California. So you have to learn how to just draw on that and use that. The more they feel that they're part of the crew, the better you're going to get, the more you're going to get out of them, and the more cohesion you're going to get, which leads to base culture.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I do want to touch on base culture, but I kind of want to hit on some of the
Sure.
points that you were talking about. I think it's human nature to want to feel like you're part of the team, right?
Oh yeah.
Um, and when you alienate someone, um, for whatever reason you're doing that, then you're, potentially, not potentially, but you are hurting your chances of success. This is everything from flying helicopters to running a sales team to running a sports team. If members of a team are not feeling included, they're not going to feel comfortable in speaking up if they feel a certain way. They're not going to feel comfortable in expressing really anything, maybe fear of retaliation or whatever it may be. So I think it's really important. And on the air medical side, the way that I've always looked at it is, you know, I was in the 407, so two med crew sitting in the back, as you said. Six eyes better than two eyes. At the bare minimum, if I have six eyes looking out in all directions, then I'm already having more situational awareness of the entire area. So if all my med crew does is keep their eyes outside and they're looking for traffic obstacles or things like that, I'm already winning. And then on top of that, now you're going into a night scene call. We had one crew member wearing NVGs. That was really valuable. There was a time where, I almost hit a tower, a legitimate, unlit, unknown tower in the middle of nowhere, Texas, that I don't know if I would have hit it, but I was very close and I didn't see it. And it was my Russell Monroe, shout out, my paramedic in the back that said, "Hey, do you see that tower?" And I was able to, avert or divert, I should say. And so I think it's, and I had the same attitude that you had. I would go into my base, whether it's my consistent base or if I was doing a workover, making sure that the crew really felt important, because they are. They're not just important for the mission that they provide in the healthcare side of it, but they're also very valuable for the safety of the helicopter. And I think that's a big culture shift. I think a lot of the old guys in the industry, would coin the self-loading baggage term and things like that, that I think is a really demeaning, demonstrative term that is hopefully not so much the case anymore. Pilots, we all have a bit of an ego, so it's easy sometimes to go in there and make it like your poo poo don't smell. But at the end of the day, you're human, they're human. You guys have to figure out a way to interact together. So it's great to hear that uh, a guy with your experience is still going in with that mindset. Um, you talked about base culture. I can tell you a thing or two about negative base culture, but I'm curious to kind of hear your perspective on. A lot of our listeners are probably just getting to the point where maybe they hit their camps requirements and they're ready to go work air medical. What is it? What is it? This base culture about, and how do you, as an employee, as a pilot, enable a positive experience and a positive base culture?
Well, I remember when I started thinking about going to through EMS, and a lot of the wisdom that I would get is from these other pilots that have done EMS is just mind your own business. Don't interact with the crew because you're going to get involved in drama. Just go into your room, close the door, and if the phone rings, that's when you go and work, and that'll be your key to success in EMS. And I thought about that. I was like, that's a horrible way to live and work. Um, I think it's the opposite, because if you come in and you walk in, you grab your coffee, you brief the crew, you pre-flight, and you go in your room for your 12 hours and you don't talk to anybody, how do you build that trust? How are they going to feel comfortable working with you? How are you going to learn the job? Because these people have probably flown in the area more than you have. So it starts there, talking with the crew, letting them know that you're a person. You're a human being. You could talk about your experience. You could ask them questions, get to know them because you're going to be working with these people 12 hours a day, weeks at a time. You're stuck in this base, you're stuck in the helicopter. So that's the first thing. As a pilot, you're automatically put in this leadership role. Doesn't matter whether you've been an EMS pilot for a month or 10 years. The crew will look at you because of the skills you have as a leader. You're holding literally have their lives in your hands. So as that leader, your attitude when you come into work every day matters. The attitude on how you take flights, on whether you turn down for BS, things like that matter, and it spreads. So if you come in with that good attitude can be very contagious, and you're key into quashing the little buds of bad attitude that can pop up, whether it's the salty old medic that comes in or anything like that. You've got to be that person that can kind of take the pulse of the base and determine that. And then there's other factors that bad base culture can happen because you're in a remote base that everyone has to commute to. No one wants to be there. But there are things that you can improve. I'm known for cooking at the base. So a lot of bases have Traegers, which again,
Nice.
super morale builder for anyone who wants to improve base culture. And a lot of crews know if I'm coming to work there, they know they're going to eat well, and
Nice.
and it makes their day. And people are like, hey, what are we cooking today, Roger? Oh, we're going to do a pork shoulder. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. So, it's those little things, whatever it is. If they're gamers and you're on the Xbox or something that brings that crew together and makes it a joy for them to come to work. You know, be part of their scenarios when they're training a third rider. Be the patient. You know, do something like that. All that stuff brings that team feeling in, and obviously having a good relationship with the clinical lead as well.
Yeah, no, it's all really important. I'm also a bit of a pit master myself, and would try to coerce my crew into liking me by trying to grill up things. What's your specialty? What's like your go-to Traeger recipe?
Tri-tip is good because it cooks up in 45, 50 minutes, and if you've got a grill there, you can sear it after you smoke it. Pork shoulder's easy because you can go on a call and it's still cooking and it's not going to get
Yep,
ruined. So I do a bunch of different things.
that's awesome. I
Yeah.
just did for the first time some fillets on the Traeger. Slow cooked them for about an hour. Got them to like I think about 138 internal temp, and then let them rest. And then I did a reverse sear on a cast iron.
Yep. Yep.
Um,
That's the way to do it.
so apparently, we've now transitioned from the helicopter podcast to the pit
Perfect.
boss or the pit master podcast. But uh,
Smoked meatloaf is the new one that I'm doing at some of the bases. So look that up.
really,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, we're gonna have to connect on that after the
Yeah.
episode because God knows I love meatloaf.
There you go.
Yeah, it's base culture is interesting because base culture, you as a pilot can do everything right, and you can still be within a negative base culture. And you as a pilot can exacerbate that negative culture. I've experienced both. I had really positive experiences at two of the bases that I worked at. One of the bases I worked at, I had a fairly negative experience, and I think one of the problems is that I don't know if it was of boredom or it's just kind of my personality, but I actually started to engage a little bit into the negativity. Um, you think you're allowing someone to vent, and so you think maybe you're doing the right thing. Hey, they're venting about this other crew member or the boss or whatever. And, that's kind of like that lateral venting, which actually, in my opinion, is pretty unhealthy in an organization. I've always said, like, you should vent up the chain,
Hmm.
If you're having problems with one of your teammates, one of your crew members, it's easy to vent to another crew member that you're friends with or comfortable with. And I caught myself sometimes being the shoulder to cry on, so to speak. And yeah, things were not good at that base. And I don't think that I helped it. I really think that by being that voice and that shoulder to cry on, I just wrapped myself up in their drama, and it actually became kind of a negative experience and um, turned me off a little bit of wanting to work at that base. It made going to work not very fun.
I think in that situation, you've got to walk that fine line of, yeah, being that ear for that person, but you also have to maintain a little bit of neutrality, you know, and maybe encourage communication between the two that are conflicting, that that are
Yeah,
having that conflict. And if you can kind of maintain that neutrality and back off, when it gets a little too, hey, whatever, and you're just like, hey, I'm just the pilot, but I'm here to listen and
yeah.
whatever. I think that can help. But yeah, it can be tricky. I mean, now
It's a
now it's a Dr. Phil episode, you
Yeah,
know.
it's a slippery slope, and just because 'cause I'm bald, I think people come to me, they think I am Dr. Phil. Um, but no, that was hard for me, and that was, an interesting learning moment, and we were able to kinda turn things around. The base culture got better and better, but I think actually for a time, I was only making the culture worse, um, and it wasn't my intention, but, I was kinda buying into some of the stuff that was being said, and then I was kinda stirring the pot a little bit, which was a negative trait that I was bringing to this little family unit, You see these people more than you see your wife or your kids usually, and so it's easy to kind of have this, almost incestuous, relationship with negativity and, almost like you're interacting with your sibling or something like that.
No, and
Um,
it's a spiral that's very hard because it becomes habitual, and it's that your brain automatically gets into that mode.
yeah, no, totally. Yeah, so I mean, if you're listening out there, listen to Roger, don't listen to me, or you can learn from my mistake at least. I think I handled that situation poorly. I think, um, I guess it's sometimes easy to get wrapped up in the drama, and it's not necessarily a positive thing to do. And building a good base culture, getting involved is great. Cooking food, everyone loves food. Food is like the love language for everyone. You make someone
Yeah.
a good dinner, man, they'll love you forever.
Oh, yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, it's that fine line. And as you can attest, Roger, I'm sure it's at times difficult, especially if you're at a base long term. Again, you get to know those people, they become kind of like family. It's easy to start bickering like family.
And there's telltale signs that also, there's physical signs when you walk into a base and the base is a disaster, boxes from, medical gear that haven't been thrown away and just stuff stacking up. That contributes, and that shows. And when I walk into something like that, I'm like, "Oh, here we go," you know?
Yeah.
But you can walk into another base that's pristine, that looks like somebody's living room, that's nice, and, maybe they've got some nice candles or some pillows up, or they've got pictures from past crews up, and you're like, "Okay, this base cares about where they work." And you walk in and you already get that feeling of, "Okay, this is gonna be good. We're a team."
Yeah, it's about taking pride in what you do. When people show up to work and they take pride in what they do and they take pride of their base, air medical bases in themselves become almost like teams. I'm this base and I'm proud of this base. I would go to bases, back to that Kentucky base. Where was that, man? It was near the Cincinnati, Kentucky border. I forget the name of the base. I want to give them a shout out because that was like that base. I walked in there, it was clean. There was Christmas, cards all over. People were making food for each other. People were playing basketball. I mean, it was just a very fun, uh, really fun environment, really peaceful, happy environment. And I even wrote to their program director after, like, "Hey, just from my outside perspective, like, you guys are doing it right." And it's so nice to go in that situation. So if you're thinking about working air medical, uh, really listen to what Roger's saying, what I'm saying in regards to being a positive figure in that base culture. It's not always going to be perfect, but if you can kind of take the high road, maintain some neutrality, and not allow kind of lateral venting to just keep spiraling into a downhill, I think that you can be in a very happy environment.
Yeah, definitely. It's key. It's key to longevity in the job, and enjoying the job. I still enjoy every day coming to work and knowing, and you got to maintain that attitude, and it'll show, and people will want to work with you.
Yeah, totally. Side note, Sean Moretz just texted me back and said, "Ha, good dude." So
Oh, well, great.
he gives you the seal. So you got to be a good dude. Um, well, that's interesting. Prior to your air medical experience, what were you doing?
I did 5 years offshore, working for Bristow in Nigeria.
Wow, that's one of those jobs.
Yeah.
That's Sean actually did that as well.
Yep.
I know that he worked, I think,
He
in
was,
Angola, Africa.
yeah, Heli Malongo in Angola. Yeah.
Yep. So, I know I've talked to a lot of pilots recently. I guess maybe not so recently. I don't know if work is drying up there a little bit, but I know that that was a popular route for a long time, specifically because it pays well. Or my understanding is that it pays well. Um, what what drove you to look at doing that job? And I'm just kind of curious to hear what that experience was like because there's so much to that. I mean, just getting to Nigeria, what is that like?
So I got into it thanks to a buddy of mine who was my instrument instructor that I met in Fresno at Macy's when I got my instrument rating, Cody Haman, and he had been working there, and I had been working as a news pilot in Vegas, reporting and flying for Channel 13, and I liked that job, loved it, super easy, enjoyed being on TV. Um,
You were reporting too? Like
oh yeah,
you were the
yeah,
personality?
yep, yep,
Nice.
yeah.
I did E&G. I was supposed to just be a relief pilot, but then the main guy had a heart attack like the day that I finished training. And so I got thrusted into full time for like 8 months. And I really enjoyed E&G. I always thought though that the guys that also are the personality, like that would be challenging because there's actually E&G has some complexity to it.
It is, and I was following in the footsteps of Paul Hollenbeck, who was he had been flying forever. He flew the L.A. riots, all that. He was a former police, L.A. County pilot. This guy was a pro, and I'm jumping into these shoes as he retired, and it's tough. It's very hard to maintain that focus, fly the aircraft, talk to McCarran, and report, knowing the streets. Luckily, I had a great cameraman, but it is challenging. But I really love the job, and as I found out that that contract was ending, I started looking for my escape route. And Cody had been selling me on Nigeria, which sounded great. The money was sounded amazing, and I worked overseas when I was in the army, never as a civilian. So I was just like, okay, let me try it out. And Cody was, again, with some networking. Cody was able to get me into this position, and I'll tell you, it's just being able to get hired there, getting your visa, getting all that stuff done. Once that's all set, heading out there is, yeah, it's a 4 hour flight to Atlanta, and then from Atlanta, it's an 11-hour flight to Lagos. Then you're there getting you got to do a air law test, you got to get your medical, you got to go through all that stuff, and then you fly to the compound in Escravos, which is in the middle of the jungle, just off the beach in like deep Nigeria, and it's a whole new environment, just everywhere. Yeah, it's
Yeah, I mean it's no joke. I mean it's a whole new world, might as well be a whole new world.
well, you're learning to fly in an area that has very little aviation infrastructure. You're trying to check weather. It's there's no weather reporting stations. You're be guessing. There's different weather patterns. There's the seasonal harmattan, which is this fine dust that comes from the Sahara in the wintertime. It looks like fog. The first time I saw it, it's like this is fog, but no, it's dust, and it drops visibility down to less than a quarter of a mile. And a lot of things that you have to really depend on. If you're flying over the jungle, you get a chip light. Are you really going to land in that village? I don't know.
I
There's
wouldn't.
there's kid people get kidnapped there all the time still. So you've got to really rethink your emergency procedures. You got to think, your survival. If something bad happens, you got to make sure you're talking to the other guys that are flying and make sure everybody knows where they're at. Yeah, it's definitely austere. It's hard work. You're flying about 100 hours for the month that you're there. 45 landings a day. Um,
Wow.
uh, in
What?
unair conditioned 407s.
And you're in a 407?
These were the highest time, the highest landing 407s on the globe.
Wow.
They recently changed when it went from Bristow to Caverton. Caverton bought a bunch of GXs, so they got rid of those 407s. But yeah, they were some old birds.
And you did it for 5 years.
5 years, which is a testament to what I will do for money.
Yeah, I mean, hey,
Uh,
if you're getting paid, there
I
is that, right? I mean,
Yeah, and I will say some of the pluses is you're gonna meet pilots from around the world, South Africans, Irish, South Americans. These are some of the best pilots out there. The guys that have been flying in Nigeria for 20, 25 years. These guys were flying when there was even less infrastructure and it was war, wild, wild west. And these guys are really, really experienced, um, really good pilots. It's I will say when it comes to attitude, it's very hard, and it was a lesson learned for me is because of some of the challenges there and just some of the just all that stuff is it's hard to maintain a positive attitude a lot of times. And when you're there for a month and the facilities are lacking and things like that and the food's bad, it's very hard to maintain that positive attitude, and that can affect other people. And I think looking back, I could have had a better attitude. So that's why I really focus on that in the EMS world, because I learned how that affects other people, and how contagious that can be, and how the perception of you as a professional can be also if you don't put that in check. So
yeah, I mean, that's a very mature stance. It's hard to be self-critical in any circumstance, right? Um, our egos bruise easily and we like to protect that. So it's interesting for you to say that. I know that there's been times in my helicopter career, in my business career, where I look at things that I did or said that I wasn't super happy about. Um, or a situation that I handled. I learned a long time ago, like if you're about to send a fire email, you might as well let it sit in the draft folder for 24 hours. And then if you wake up and you still want to send it, then send it, I guess. But you know, it's it's good. It's good to have that growth. And part of it's probably you get a little bit older, right? You get a little bit older, a little bit wiser, and you can look back and kind of see the situation. And my guess is that experience and you being able to be self-critical and it kind of adjust the way that you operate around people has probably made you even more successful in the air medical world, especially interacting with your base culture, things like that that we talked about.
yeah, and you have to take lessons learned from the diverse places and things we can do in this industry, and you got to take the positives and the negatives and kind of mold it into what your rest of your career is going to be. And again, amazing, amazing pilots and mechanics that I worked with in Nigeria. It was an experience. The money was great, but it's not for everybody. Certain people would show up, they do a month there, and they're like, "We're done, gone," and
Totally.
and
Yeah.
never to be seen from again. And then other people could do 20 years there, and that's the marathon right there.
Yeah. I don't know. I think Sean was there for like 7 or 8 years up in Angola, which I always thought was crazy. But I know he was, again, it's a good compensated, you get compensated well. I know that there's other jobs out there that are month on, month off, kind of all over the world, um, for, heavy lift operations and other things like that. What does a job like that do on your personal life?
It's At the time that I was doing that, I was married, and um, it's tough. You got to have a partner who's supportive, independent, can do things on their own, and needs to be willing to accept that you're gone for a month at a time. And sometimes the internet doesn't work. Sometimes you can't FaceTime. Sometimes you can't do that. Um, it, uh, it could be a challenge, especially going from a job when I was flying the news and you're home every night, and they get used to that, and now suddenly you're gone. It was when I told her that I was taking that job, it was it was tears. It was very tough. She wanted me to go fly for Maverick and do all. I was like this, but you also have your set goals in your career that you have to do. So you have to make some choices, and after 2 years though, and there were some times that I was like, I don't think I want to do this anymore. They get used to the money too, and they get used to that lifestyle. And yeah, I missed the birth of my son because I was in Nigeria. Um, I had shifted my schedule so that I'd be home a week before the due date, and of course, my son decided to come 3 weeks early. And I was about to. The way I heard about it was I was on the flight line. I was ready to start the helicopter and get ready to go for the afternoon shift change. And I checked my phone and I got a message from my wife saying that she was in labor. And I was at that point, stopped everything, walked off the line, walked into the chief pilots. I said, "Hey, I can't fly. My wife just went in labor. I got to get out of here." And to the credit of the chief pilot and another friend of mine, Steve Connolly, who was another pilot there, I missed the flight to Lagos, the one flight in the afternoon that gets me to Lagos. So they arranged to throw me in a 407, and Connolly flew me up to Lagos and dropped me off. I was still wearing my uniform and just a backpack, and I was able to take that Delta flight back that evening. So I got into Vegas probably about 24 hours after my son's birth. But
Wow, that's cool that they cut you loose like that.
well, I mean, honestly, are you going to have a pilot fly the line when something major like that in their life is happening? I mean, I wouldn't have been able to focus.
Yeah, and that was was that your first kid?
Yeah, first and only, first and
First
only.
and only. Yeah, I mean, maybe after your like third or fourth kid, you're like, yeah,
Yeah, I'm good.
I'll see him. I'll see him in
I'm
a
good.
couple weeks.
Good.
Middle child syndrome.
So there are
Um,
there are sacrifices and there are hardships when you're doing a job that gets you away that long, and there's prices to pay when it comes to that.
y-
So you need to make sure that you have a strong partner and that they understand your job and those challenges.
yeah, I mean, it's one of the difficult parts of the industry is being able to maintain personal relationships. Most specifically with your significant other, your children. Not just if you're flying, in Africa, but even air medical, week on, week off. A lot of the air medical bases are not in desirable living locations. So you can either move the whole family to BFE, North Dakota, or you could kind of live in a more desirable area but have to commute. And that's challenging. I commuted. My wife stayed in Vegas for about a year when I was doing air medical in Texas, and I commuted back and forth. And you kind of get used to the way of life, and it's okay. And you take advantage of the time that you do have together. You hold it a little bit closer, but it's tough on a relationship. And I think that there's a lot of jobs in the industry where if you're just getting into the industry or you're looking for your first job, if consider that. Even if you're in your young 20s, you're not even really thinking about that. You know, if you're young, go take advantage of all the fun stuff. Go to 6 months in another country and fly. And
Absolutely.
take advantage of all that stuff now because as you get older, your priorities may change. You may be more focused on wanting to have a family or whatever you want to do. And so, it's interesting. It's kind of the funny part about the helicopter industry is it can be tough on relationships.
Oh yeah,
And I can
even if you're single, imagine having working in Nigeria and you're trying. I knew some of the single guys there that they're trying to date a girl, and you got a few dates under your belt, and then you're gone for a month.
Yeah.
How does that relationship progress? How do that's tough even for those guys.
Yeah. No, that would be challenging, but it would be, I mean, I think, man, if you're young and you have the opportunity to go do something like that, I think that would be pretty cool. I think being able to go, like you said, there's a lot of, not only can you sharpen your tool set as a helicopter pilot, but you can grow up quite a bit, working in a country like Nigeria or somewhere, and so that's experience that I don't have. I'll never have that, and part of me regrets that a little bit. I had opportunities as a young pilot to go and do things, but I kind of chose to stay in my comfort zone, closer to home up in Oregon. So you have to kind of pick and choose, but, interesting. We haven't really talked much about the personal side, so I threw that one on you. So thanks for talking about it.
That's fine. That's fine. No, and it's important, and it's one of the benefits of being in this job, and you can't get too comfortable because you can have that nice cushy ENG job that has you home every night, and that contract can go away one day, and now you are having to do EMS or go to Africa or do whatever. So you never know.
You have to be flexible and you have to be ready to adapt to the situation. Well, as we kind of near to the end here, you've been in the industry now for a long time. 2006. Um, that's what just a couple years from 20 years, actually.
It doesn't feel like it. I'll tell you that.
That's crazy. I graduated high school in 2006, so you have a little more experience than I do. um,
Wow.
I know. I should. That's just a jerk thing of me to say.
No, it's
Um, but I
as yeah. Go ahead.
think, I mean, things happen fast. Life happens fast. I started flight training, I think, in 2007 or 2008. Um, and yeah, I look back at my career now. It's like, God, I can't believe I've been in this helicopter world for so long. What kind of advice would you give to kind of all levels of your former self? Getting into your CFI job, flying tours, ENG. What is something that you would tell your early self today?
Man, right now that with the internet, there's just so much information out there that's at your fingertips to get more information about whatever part of the industry you want to jump into. Um, in the beginning, you think, oh, well, maybe I want to do utility and do some research on that or EMS, and um, I kind of fiddled, and I knew I had to do tours. And again, networking helps. I badgered, the guy who was working, at the news station when he was going to leave and jump into that position. So you obviously need to network, get to know people, and then as a certain point, those people are going to need your help at one day. It's just the topsy turvy way that the job works. You're going to help one guy get this job, and then one day he's going to be at a job that you're going to need. I thought about this because a lot of your guests have a lot of the same advice, and it's all good advice. And I was trying to think of something that a lot of people don't think about, or something that I see. And one thing, it's kind of out of left field, is focus on your health as a pilot. If you're going to be in this industry for a while, I still see pilots that are chain smokers and on blood pressure medication and all that stuff. And I mean, we rely on having that medical to work, and that can go away like that, either through bad living habits and lifestyle to a freak health event. So it's really on you as you're going to stay on and get more experience, like me, um,
Got a
to
little gray in the beard. Got a little gray in the beard.
to take care of yourself, and watch your weight and focus on that kind of stuff, because that will sneak up on you, and it could end your career early.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really sound advice. A lot of a common denominator on the show is the network. Everyone always talks about the network, and I think it's a good common denominator. It's a good thing to talk about. But health is something. I think you're the first to bring that up, and it's especially as you get older. It's harder to maintain a healthy living style. And air medical, you can attest, in my opinion, it's almost one of the hardest jobs to have and maintain. Good healthy eating habits, exercise routine, sleep habits. I mean, talk about a real, it beats your body up really good. And, I think it's important, and I'm glad that you brought that up. Health, health is all we have, and for our profession, you're exactly right. I mean, we're one failed medical away from not having a pot to piss in.
And in EMS, you see it with the patients you transport. When people always ask the EMS pilots, like, "What's the worst thing? What's the most horrible thing you've ever seen?" And they're expecting me to say something about an accident where, this happened or that happened. And I say it's the most horrible thing that I've ever seen are the constant people that we transport that have been neglecting their health their entire life through drugs, eating, whatever, and now they're in organ failure because they've just abused their body. Because that's avoidable. That's the most horrible thing. And
Yeah, no, I mean, you see
yeah,
that in air. I mean, people all the time. Yeah, they want to hear that you're landing on a highway, and it's cool stuff that you get to do. But a lot of the EMS transport is like, yeah, diabetes, heart issues, stroke. A lot of it's caused, again, like you said, by poor lifestyle changes. I do think that in the industry too, there's an excessive use of alcohol. I think pilots like to drink.
yep.
Um, you work, especially on a hitch job, it can get real dangerous. You work 7 days on or 30 days on, 30 days off. You know, uh, I know a lot of people that sometimes turn to the bottle to cope a little bit, and I think that's unhealthy. Um, so I think it's all about taking good care of yourself. And trying to make a routine out of something that's not very routine, like air medical. How can you eat healthy when you're living in a hotel? You can figure out a way. You can do it. It takes some work, but you can figure it out. And yeah, I mean, you look like a healthy guy. Obviously, you take good care of yourself. I go in waves, man. I'm like, I have moments of, running marathons to how I feel now. I'm not in fighting shape right now. But it's a wave. So yeah, prioritizing yourself.
I have a 6-year-old at home, so my motivation is to stay as healthy as possible for as long as possible. With him, I'm 48, so I gotta I gotta stick it out. So that's the
Yeah, yeah,
motivation.
yeah. That's awesome. Well, hey, Roger, thank you so much for reaching out. If you are listening to the podcast right now and you think that you would be an awesome guest like Roger has, reach out. I love connecting with new people. The whole point of this podcast is, like Roger said, there's so many resources now um, on what this industry is all about, but there's not that many helicopter specific podcasts. And so it's been really fun to talk with people from all over the industry and learn about what's important to them, how they've become to how they gotten to where they're at, and just kind of everything in between. So I hope that this is a valuable resource. And I know, Roger, thank you so much for being on, because I think a lot of what we talked about today is really valuable. I think we talked about kind of more mid-level pilot, stuff. What is it like working in that air medical base, positive base culture? We didn't talk too much about helicopters. I don't even know what kind of helicopters you fly. What are you flying?
Right now, 407, 429, and the 109, which I'll be dropping here in April. But yeah, so that's what I'm flying. I know you've got a lot of 429 guys that have talked about it. And, one thing that I wanted to talk about is everyone has been mentioning a lot of the restrictions in the 429, that it's a great bird and all that stuff. I've been flying it now for 4 or 5 months. You just got to do some pilot stuff, and you can milk a little bit more time out of that bird with your fuel management. And there's a
Yeah.
lot of tools available.
And if you're not familiar with what Roger is referring to, is when the 429 went through certification with the FAA specifically. I don't know the whole back end story, but apparently some ruffled feathers at the FAA, and essentially the FAA has restricted the max gross weight. And what is it, 500 pounds of fuel?
It's down to 7,000 max gross weight. When it around the world, it's 7,500.
Yeah,
So
so
you
you lose
lose.
500 pounds. And that's hard in air medical, especially if you're flying the ship as an IFR asset. That could be, you don't fully load it with a patient and crew. I mean, what kind of leg times are you able to do?
In California, it's not so bad. We've got shorter leg times. I can carry about 2 hours of fuel if I max gross off the pad. But you get used to, especially in a 407, or if you're in a bigger ship or whatever, to have 3 hours of fuel and you don't have to worry about it. Um, and again, there's good things about the 429, and obviously you have to struggle with your fuel management, but you just have to do the fuel planning and don't pull the guts out of it when you're cruising. Maybe go
Sure.
to an economy cruise. You're still going to get there pretty fast, and you can milk 15 to 20 more minutes of fuel out of it. So um, it can be done. It can be done. I don't know if Arizona. I mean, they're doing it in New Mexico with the 429. So there, people are figuring it out. And yes, no one wants to stop for fuel, but I think the benefits of the 429 definitely outweigh the drawbacks. But
Yeah, I mean, it's like any helicopter. I always kind of tell people you just have to kind of play with the hand that you're dealt. You know, everything from a R22 up to a 429, you can talk some smack about, and I've always just kind of thought, well, you just fly the machine that you're flying, and you have to fly within the limitations and the capabilities of that machine. And if you do that, you could be safe, and it can be a perfectly functioning machine for the mission. You know, I've always kind of stressed
yeah,
that, and thank you for that feedback. I know that we've had some more harsh feedback in the past on the 429. If there's any regret to me kind of getting out of the flying world and going towards the business side of helicopters, it's that I don't have any twin time, specifically the 429. I don't know. I mean, I'm just like, I think it's one of the sexiest helicopters,
it
just
is. It
visually.
is. It is.
And then you look in the cockpit and you're like, I feel like a little kid again. Like if I'm at Heli Expo and I'm looking in the cockpit of the 429 or the 139 or whatever, it's like, oh man, look at all these buttons and all these screens. It's all very exciting.
I'm so used to flying things that were built when Nirvana was in the top of the charts. It's so nice to have something new and fresh. So it's nice.
Yeah.
But so there's our helicopter talk for the
Yeah, we did
podcast,
it.
for the
That's
episode. We
good.
got it.
We got it in there. Well, Roger, thank you so much.
Thanks for having
And
me.
thank you for listening to the helicopter podcast too, Roger. And for anyone else out there, I appreciate you all listening. Please like, share, if you subscribe, then you'll be notified when we drop new episodes. We're trying to drop new episodes every Tuesday. And in order to do that, I need a lot of guests. 52 weeks in a year. So I need a lot of guests. So if you're out there and you want to be a guest, you think you have something to share, I'd love to chat with you. Again, Roger, thank you so much. And thank you for listening to the Helicopter Podcast.